So, a couple of things to go over. Food stamps, probably depending on, the government hasn't reconvened. Speaker of the House doesn't seem like he wants to have any discussions about the bills or, funding Americans, funding our programs, or doing anything, really. Because, ever since July, the House has only done has only 20 days of actually, doing something. It's July, that's how many months? Like 4 months? And they've only met like 20 times to talk over anything, and now that we're like almost a month into the shutdown, it's still, does they don't seem to give a shit, put it quite frankly. Now, I did some of the data analysis looking over the differences between the last long shutdown, of course, under the first Trump administration, smack dab in the middle of the first Trump administration between 2018 and 2019. Remember, he was elected end of 2016, sworn in beginning of 2017. Fiscal year for 2018 started October 2017 under the Trump administration. So all the rules that led up to, and the funding rules that led up to the 2018-2019 government shutdown was under that first Trump administration. Just full stop. None to do with Biden, none to do with anything like that. And in fact, because, as we can go over here, granted, I tried to look this up on Google. It's not giving me like anything. It's not even saying that the AI just refuses to give me an analysis or whatever. So clearly, even more things have changed with Google, which also lends to be a problem, especially now that we have this whole Grokpedia thing. That's a whole other segment, though. So for the 2018-2019 United States federal government shutdown, it happened while both the Senate and the House were primarily in charge from Republicans, you know? So from the representatives elected in the November 2018 election took office, giving Democrats a majority in the House. So only until November 2018, mind you, like a month after they weren't even able to pass the budget bill, they finally got a majority in the House. Because of that, there was fighting for weeks and weeks and weeks. Trump maintained that you would veto any bill that did not fund because of the friggin' border wall. Literally held the government and everything else hostage, as it even says down here. Democrats and some Republicans opposed the shutdown and passed multiple bills to reopen the government, arguing that the government shutdown amounted to taking civil servants hostage, and that negotiations can only begin once the government was reopened. Right? And deja vu. The same shit again. Except we don't have a midterm election. In fact, we're supposed to be having another House representative sworn in. They should have been sworn in over a month ago. But that's been held hostage as well. So clearly, under the first Trump administration, this article is part of a series about Donald Trump. Oh my goodness. Very specific. But clearly, history repeats itself in patterns, and understanding that, during the first shutdown, which, mind you, technically should have been from October to February, but because there was so much extra funding that was left behind from years prior, which is also another question that we need to ask, is where did all that money go? Was it ever, accounted for? All that extra funding that was able to fund the government until December 22nd of that year, and to fund SNAP benefits, food stamps, until at least February from October. So that was not even a decade ago. That was, 2018, 2019. That was about 5, almost 6 years ago during the first Trump administration. And now we're going through this whole thing again. The second administration, except, well, the first year in, so not even smack dab in the middle, but the first year in, the funding, I mean, for SNAP, the budgeting from then compared to now has been exactly adjusted for inflation. Like literally, like the food specific inflation has been since 2019 to 2025, 30%, specifically for food. On average, 26.72%. So that's the difference in cost from then to now. The differences in number of recipients has changed about 15% from 2019 to now. Back then we had about, I think it was 30, what was it? We had 42 million estimated this year. Previously, it was 35.7 million recipients in 2019. So a slight bump in recipients, but the budget has been very consistent following inflation, as well as checking into the averages for the payouts, the monthly payouts for recipients. That has also been exactly about a 30% difference following inflation. Average individual monthly allowance 2019 versus 2024 and 2025, about a 69% ratio between the two, and then you minus 100 to find the percentage change, 31%. So, and that's considering the monthly allowance, and then also considering the total amount of budget adjusted for recipients. So, multiplying the ratio the ratio of recipients compared to the totals and the amount for the budget expenditure, it balances out to 29.3%, just under the rate of food inflation of 30%. So comparing the budget from 2019 to 2025, including and accounting for the recipients, like the plus 15%, it's still following inflation. It's about like a few percentile difference, a few percentile under, which might explain a little bit of the stress that we're feeling, but it doesn't really necessarily explain how between 2018 and 2019 we were able to get through from October till February, and we would have probably run out in March. So that's what, October, November, December, January, February, about almost a half a year of funding was still available. And then when we look at what was spent between 2018 and 2019 fiscally, so 2018, because again, this shutdown happened kind of in between the 2 years, 65.3 billion 2018 total spent. 2019, 63 billion spent. So less spent. And that should have properly accounted for what needed to be taken out to keep up until March, right? So there was no problem, even with all the disagreements that was going on because of the funding for the border wall. And it was, at least prior to, November 2018? It was all Republican controlled Senate and House. So, oh wait, no. The Senate at that point, let me check again, 115th Congress. From January 3rd, yep, the final weeks of Barack Obama's presidency to the first 2 years of Donald Trump's seats. The Republican Party retained their majority in both the House and the Senate, and with the inauguration of Donald Trump on January 20th, 2017, attained an overall federal government trifecta. So they had a very similar build, just legislatively, like within the government, they had the trifecta then, just like now, but they were able to fund SNAP for 5 more months. Now they can't all of a sudden. Which this is the issue that I'm pointing out. The budget shows that everything has been adjusted properly. The budget shows that this is possible to continue funding. It's possible to even keep the government open. There was also some rules and stipulations from the 2018 fiscal year, which again was still Republican controlled, saying that they can reach into the year prior. So maybe they did that preemptively, understanding that, this is only Trump's first term. If we want him to have a second term, we have to still make him look good. The posturing, right? everything behind it, because again, the numbers are the numbers. They all are fine. Everything was still kosher according to how the calculations ran through. And then with what the argument was then, because of the border wall, this time it's because of affordable healthcare. So now it's just genuinely even more of a screwed up situation, because we're not getting 5 months of, mind you, 12% of the population that relies on these programs. About 42 million people take in food stamps, and it's all income based for the most part, unless you're on disabilities or everything else. There's work requirements if you're an independent between 18 to 55, you still have a work requirement typically, unless you were just let go and you're receiving unemployment, yada yada. And plus, I mean, as we see now, that 42 million is kind of taking into account the layoffs, the people that lost their jobs. And as that is kind of increasing, as the government is getting more and more strained, as even something like this, again, about 12% of the population, 42 million people, use SNAP benefits. So when we look at last year's expenditure, it was about 100 billion. Okay, $99.8 billion, 2024 fiscal spending, 2025, about 100.3 billion. So the year that just ended. The USDA is requesting about 181.7 billion, so almost double that amount, or well, about 161.9. They probably typically always over request. Plus, mind you, they have to pay for workers. But again, we're during a government shutdown. Workers aren't even getting paid. There's money to pay people their food stamps. And again, that's food stamps is a law. It's legislated by Congress. It's supposed to be followed. That budget is supposed to be there. Breaking that law just because you don't want people to have affordable health care, or just whatever the argument is, they're losing. It's a losing game. And it's only causing damage to 12% of the population. Not even just the 12%. You got to also consider the fact that these people, like the places that accept food stamps, they take in that government money to then pay the farmers, because that's how, the economic chain works. So if you take out 12% of a supermarket's revenue, for instance, because you're not using EBT food stamps at restaurants. You're not doing that. You can't do that. It doesn't work on prepared food like that. It only works at grocery stores. So you're hurting supermarkets. They're losing at least 12% of their profit. And again, if we could just look up number of SNAP recipients 2025. So 42 million. It's not giving me the percentage. Percentage compared to population of United States. I guess let's get a little bit more nuanced here. 12 to 12.5%. 12 to 12.5% of the population uses this to buy their groceries at the grocery store. And you can even make the argument that this indiscriminately, just like the ratio that this affects grocers compared to the rest of the food market, is much, much worse than 12 to 12.5%. Because again, people that are in the higher percentage, like the top 1% or the top highest earners, I mean, yeah, they'll go to the grocery store from time to time, but they're typically going out to restaurants. They can go out to eat wherever the hell they want. They can afford to do that. They don't need to go to the grocery store just as often as the lower 50% of the population, right? So it unfairly targets grocery stores And because of that loss of revenue, that 12.3% could be closer to like 25% of, say, like the company Giant, or like Market Basket, the Demoulas Food, Hannaford's, like all those supermarkets. Like, I'm not even considering Whole Foods. I mean, people could go to Whole Foods and use food stamps, but typically you're not having people go to Whole Foods and using their food stamps, right? Because you want to get more for that money. So you're going to go to the cheapest option so you can get more food for less money. That would be the logical conclusion to people that receive SNAP that are poor, that want to get the most out of their benefits. So who is this actually hurting? It's hurting 12% of the population, and not even just that, it's hurting every grocer just disproportionately because of just the logic of how the system works, the reality of the situation. So they're losing probably upwards of maybe 20 to 25% of their monthly income, their monthly revenue. What are these stores going to have to do to make up for that loss in monthly revenue? That's a big hit. That is huge. If this government shutdown continues for a month or two, grocery store prices are going to skyrocket. And this doesn't just hurt them, because if they have less money to buy products to fill the store with, I mean, that's less money for farmers, right? Like, it hurts the whole chain. This is much worse than the border wall shit. And mind you, back then they bailed out farmers. They had to bail them out because of, well, the trade war. But with that bailout money, they were probably able to drag it on a little bit longer. And now we have the trade war going on, except it's being caused by the US, being caused by this administration. But now they're neglecting the same issues that arose from last time, purposefully neglecting them. Because we're sending 40 billion to Argentina, and now we're going to be taking in their crops, their meat. We're just, screw farmers in America. Absolutely screw farmers in America. It's disproportionately destroys farmers in America. They're already suffering as is because of the tariffs. Now this, without this revenue, it's so bad. It's so bad. So this is why we need to look at all these numbers, because we have the money to fund these programs for longer. But they just don't want to. They want to argue Affordable Care Act. They want to argue healthcare. So this is the argument. And again, the Affordable Care Act, those healthcare subsidies make it easier for, not even just easier, it makes it possible for people that rely on food stamps to have healthcare too. Without that, then they can't afford food anyways, and the grocers get hurt regardless. So this is just a lose, 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 lose situation that the Republicans decided to put everyone in, because again, they have the trifecta. And the only reason why it changed before was because there was midterm elections. This time they're doing everything a year sooner, before midterms, so they can cause the most damage, cause the most harm, and try to posture in such a way to make Democrats look bad, but that doesn't work, because we already went through this whole spiel. And in fact, they looked a lot better back in 2018, 2019, after the 35-day shutdown, when they actually helped farmers. So it's clear that the intent for all of these things, I mean, back then, was make sure that this administration can have a second term, which they did. Now there's no need for that. They don't care. In fact, they can go for as long as they want, because that seems to be the game plan, the whole unitary executive theory. When you look into that whole thing, and, creating a monarchy again, that's basically what it comes down to, while also simultaneously hurting 12% of the population at the least, and actually more so hurting basically 90% of the population, because again, like we just discussed, this goes down the chain. This affects grocery stores disproportionately, so that they're going to have to raise prices a lot more. That food inflation is going to skyrocket because of this. If this shutdown continues, and as we see, there's no negotiations, and nothing happened, and they're on vacation. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is just like, yeah, we're ignoring these issues. We're ignoring all these problems instead of dealing with them like they did the first time. Granted, it wasn't Johnson before that was head of whatever, the House, but that doesn't matter. I mean, the head of the House before wasn't taking these orders as often as Mike Johnson does now. So we see where the chain works. So in conclusion, using a House seat, American Affordable Care, American Affordable Health Care, food stamps, and immigration as bargaining chips, because again, like we have representatives that need to be sworn in that just haven't been sworn in for whatever bullshit excuse they're making up at this point. Is compared to precedent in history, there is no reason that should be happening. And when we look back at our past experiences, the history of how things were, we can easily figure out the intents and the reasons as to why they're doing what they're doing. They're just constantly causing stress because there's no threat to their power anymore. They're already in control, more control than they were the first time. It is clear cut and dry. They have control of the money. I mean, Trump is about to pay himself 230 million of our tax dollars just because he feels like he can make the DOJ pay him that because he was investigated for literally the same thing that he's now investigating John Bolton for. Classified documents, withholding of classified documents. The documents were found. Like it's all so it's all right there. But because that they're using all these issues as bargaining chips, I mean, it's the most un-American thing a representative can do. These actions, or purposeful lack thereof, are a direct threat to millions of Americans' survival. Because our survival, and the businesses as well, is directly tied to money in this capitalist society. That is how things work. If you want to survive, because you can't just pitch up a tent anywhere you can, especially now, because you'll get kicked out or arrested or thrown into a prison camp. It's so bad. It's so bad. The threat to millions, not even just the 42 million, but to a large percentage of the population, because this affects not only just the 12.5% of the population that needs these benefits to just eat, while to simultaneously afford healthcare. So if they're disabled or if they're not any of the able-bodied individuals that have work requirements, but they also need this money because they can't work because they're disabled or sick, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They can't afford healthcare. They're not getting money for food. Then what are you're going to expect someone with like no legs to friggin' build a farm? What? You can't even buy land to build a farm. They can't do any of that. They're just dead at that point. What are they going to do? There's so many questions that you could just ask and come to easy, logical conclusions to where all this is going. But, I mean, it's a direct threat to millions of Americans, to the businesses which accept such federal programs as no food stamps money, right, is no money for grocers and farmers. No money for them means they need to raise prices and let go of employees to either break even or mitigate the losses in revenue for investors. And mind you, a lot of these employees, especially the supermarkets, they're making minimum wage. And they're also relying on SNAP benefits and the Affordable Care Act. So it disproportionately, absolutely, you're basically killing them. You are basically killing them by doing all of this, by ignoring the fact that this government shutdown is a threat to Americans' existence. And the numbers don't lie. Like the money is there. Especially if you're able to send $40 billion. $40 billion compared to only $100 billion sent last year. That's enough to fund. Oh my god. Sorry, I have telemarketers going after me now. It's insane. It's insane. So these are all things that need to be considered because grocery stores have to let go of employees. Those same employees that rely on SNAP, that rely on the Affordable Care Act, they even have health care because a lot of these grocery stores do not offer affordable health care. A lot of them don't even give you full-time hours because they're already, I mean, profit margins, et cetera, investors, yada yada. It's still going to be a loss of revenue for investors as well without any SNAP benefits, even for 1 month. That's a huge hit. Again, that's about, I want to say about 20% at the very least of the monthly income for a grocery store. Like your typical average grocery store, that's a fifth of their revenue. That's huge. And if it happens for longer with all this, I mean, that's if society allows it to happen for that long. Because if people are starving for a whole month straight, I don't think they're gonna sit idly by and just die. Like if these are the only options that they're left, what else can they do? Right? Besides either commit crimes or do bad things or do anything by any means necessary to survive. So that trickle down effect, I mean, no, that's bad. So it's unfortunately all manufactured by MAGA this time around because they had the trifecta. We're a year away from midterms. The shutdown's not going to be able to last for a year without some gigantic shift in the government or from the people. The people are not going to allow that to happen, especially as we see the No Kings protests, like with 8 million people, like the biggest protests in the history of mankind, basically. Like, that's nothing to really joke about. That's, I mean, 8 million people, when you look at the numbers here for 42 million, that's almost a quarter of the people that rely on food stamps. That is a significant part of the population. Obviously, it's not everyone, but that's, again, the most that we've ever seen. So, I mean, there were no problems during the 2018-2019 funding for the government in these programs all the way until February from October. And they were still able to fund the government itself until December. I mean, that 35-day shutdown was only 35 days because, I mean, between Obama leaving them enough money, a reserve fund, which was never replaced, it seems like, or accounted for properly, because we don't have that reserve fund now, obviously. It's all gone. It's all been spent. It was spent then, and they probably never had the mind to replenish it since. And once Biden's administration came in, I mean, what the hell was he gonna do about it? So that was all that big drop the ball there, but at the same time, back then they had a whole fiscal year where they were able to make changes to a point where they can make themselves look good. They were able to make rules so that if such an instance occurred, that they were able to reach back into the previous year's budget in order to fund for the shutdown. Same thing with SNAP. And again, that was only, as we just saw, it was only a difference of a few $1 billion from year to year from 2018 to 2019. So it barely made a difference at all in terms of funding for SNAP from the government. In fact, they ended up spending less anyways in 2019, as the whole total amount that was being spent by SNAP and food stamps was slowly going down as more and more people were getting employed and having better wages and better jobs. But then COVID hit. And mind you, we're talking about, this is all before COVID. That longest government shutdown happened literally right before COVID. So you can't even say that because of COVID, the shutdown happened. No, you're misremembering. And that's honestly something that we can really consider when comparing to the first time. Like this, it makes it so much easier to consider then versus now because they didn't have to deal with the pandemic yet. They were able to do all that funding for about 5 months, no problemo. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. Now they don't want to have any discussions. They don't want to meet. They want to keep having recess, keep taking week-long vacations from the house over healthcare, over any sort of negotiation. They don't even want to negotiate. They don't even talk to the other party. And they need those votes in order to do it. But instead, they don't talk to the other party and then they decide to blame them because they think it makes them look good to their audience. When you're hurting basically every other American that isn't you, that isn't either a politician or a millionaire. And that's bad. When we have a budget matched alongside inflation since then, so it's not the budget that's the issue. It's not the amount that's been allotted, because that's been following inflation, no problem. We stopped paying government employees much sooner this time. There's no excuse that they can't hold to the law to pay out for these programs, especially all the money they're hoarding and wasting on Argentina and bonuses for immigration officers. SNAP is guaranteed by law first and foremost before either of those executive actions, because again, the bailout for Argentina, that's not even approved by Congress. That's an executive action, which technically is also illegal. You can't do that without Congress. Second, the bonuses for immigration officers. Unfortunately, I guess that was part of the big beautiful bill, but that doesn't even take into, well, that I guess takes into effect. I don't even know anymore. There's so much misinformation and so much changing of everything, changing of even what certain words mean, what the laws mean, to a point where it's hard to even parse this type of information out. But we not even just can, but we see the experiences, we see the consequences, we feel the consequences, and we see, again, because of the past and because of patterns, the differences between this time and last time and how much more severe the consequences are for this time. So, by the end of the day, this is pure cruelty and torture for the less fortunate, for our farmers, for our grocery stores, as they'll have to account for the losses from losing SNAP funds, either by raising prices or by laying off their workers, which many of them also rely on SNAP. So it's a lose, 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 lose situation. And then I have articles as well, but I did all the numbers for you guys. I looked at it. I tried to figure out, was it just a lack of funding? Because, I mean, I was curious. Why were they able to fund SNAP for so long during the longest shutdown? No problem. In fact, they were able to get the money to people earlier for the February payment. But now, all of a sudden, they can't. And it turns out, I mean, they spent the whole reserve. They didn't put the money back into the reserve. So they must have used that to cook the books then, because it was smack dab in the middle of the first Trump administration. And I guess it was just lost in the minutia, just lost to time. And now that we're having this again, these people want to stay in power for longer than 2 terms. I mean, it's been alluded to so many times by so many different people within this administration that they want to do it in one way or another. It's just not looking good. This shows a lot of reasons and a lot of intents that are just not good, that are simply cruel to the American population. And me saying it now is a week calling it. If this shutdown continues and people don't get their SNAP benefits at all next month, it's going to be bad. It's going to be a lot worse for the less fortunate. People are going to have to make really, really, really hard decisions because, I mean, with the Affordable Care Act subsidies, they haven't renewed it. So when renewal happens, when what's the word, when sign up, yada yada, I think you know what I mean, when you can go purchase healthcare from Health Connect or whatever this time around, those subsidies aren't even there in the first place, right? There's no funding for it. So the prices, what you're going to get now, is probably what you're going to get anyways if they do somehow resolve this funding and not give out subsidies. So regardless, healthcare is done. The Affordable Care Act's done. Between that and SNAP, it's 12% of the population is basically done. And I don't know what they're going to be able to do. I don't even know what I'm going to be able to do. This is why I work 3 jobs. And I do this YouTube stuff this is like my 3rd job. I don't even get paid for it, but I'm just doing this to at least, 1, spread the information and have a different perspective, and 2, I mean, I would like to make this a career of some sort. But the reality is this country just doesn't make it easy. It doesn't allow you to work just one job like people were able to do in the 60s and 70s and be able to support a whole family. It just does not work like that. And with this additional stress, I mean, this is threatening my existence as well. Me and my family's existence, because shit. So, I don't know, let me know down in the comments below what you think. This was 36 minutes of yapping, but with all the data and stuff like that, I mean, I'll try to do a quick 5-minute right after this, short and condensed, but just so you see how I'm seeing it, how I'm laying it out for you guys. And again, you can find all this information yourself online. The only thing is, when it comes to the government websites, because as we've seen, they violated the Hatch Act many times already. So many times. The government websites are not supposed to be partisan by any means because of the Hatch Act, but clearly they are. So it's hard to trust any of the information that's even on those websites anymore. It's hard to even trust a lot of the information that's coming out now. And quite frankly, if this sort of thing happens again next year, before midterms or whatever, if they use this as another shutdown as an excuse not to swear people in, it's going to be a lot harder to fight against this through communication, through facts, through analysis. And you're not leaving people with many other options to deal with these issues. So, I mean, I guess people can try to self-deport, but it costs money to go places. It costs money to do anything in this country. It almost costs money to breathe at this point. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm going to do a short video as well, just going over the stats, quick rapid fire. And yeah, see you then. Take care. Save what you can. Buy food that's going to last you a long ass time. Stock up while you still can, because we only got about a week left. I mean, these last few weeks flew by. No problemo. They haven't negotiated shit. So I'm very certain that this is just going to be going on for probably, it's probably going to end up being the next longest shutdown. And they're going to obviously blame the Democrats. They're going to do that so they can blame the Democrats and just be able to say that they can blame the Democrats, even though clearly, when we look at the past, when we look at what happened before, the whole reason why the government shutdown ended, the longest one, was because of Democrats. They were the ones that were able to get things going, to save the American people, to make sure that people were able to get food stamps, make sure that they had health care, make sure that there was funding to fund those programs. Because if those midterm elections didn't happen, like we're witnessing now, they waited a little too long, but they had their own reasons for waiting how they did, for doing what they did, for posturing the way they did. They clearly had their own reasons. That's the whole game of being a politician. Now, things are different. Things are a lot worse. During the second Trump administration, and I don't see there's really typically any other excuse as to this is genuinely just manufactured by the Republicans. They do not care about you. They have never cared about you for the last almost decade. They care more so about what the president says than what you say. Clearly, because, I mean, they run away from town halls. They refuse to have town halls. They're scared. There's reasons why they're scared. It's because they know that they're pissing you off. They know that they're threatening your existence. They're not properly representing you. And lastly, I mean, just like back in the 1700s, no taxation without representation. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing Arizona going after the House, the GOP led House, because they're not allowing representation to exist for Arizona. I mean, that's therefore giving Arizona the right to pull out of sending federal taxes. And I think that's going to be the next step, that blue states are going to have to stop paying the federal government. And they're going to have to withhold that tax money for themselves to pay for these programs. That means that red states are going to be just as disproportionately affected by that, even more so than grocery stores are going to be affected by the loss of SNAP. Because without the cities, red states, the more rural areas, they don't have enough funding to last. They don't have enough funding to even pay for these programs on their own. So, I don't know. It's just the pendulum swinging very hard both ways now. Very hard, very quickly. And without proper recognition of, the truth of these actions, we're just subject to all the chaos that's possible at this point. So, take care, be safe. Love you all. Yeah, I'll make a short video, just glossing over everything. And then we'll do maybe desensitization as well.